your Colorado Avalanche made some big trades recently, trying to address their need between the pipes. And we're going to talk about that on today's show. We're really going to focus in on the goalies and the blue liners, talk about those trades that the Avs made, how it solidifies their crease, whether those guys carry additional fantasy value now, whether Alexander Georgiev's fantasy value is gone. And then we're also going to talk about some other goalies that we like on the waiver wire right now. So if you missed out on maybe the Avs' new goaltending duo, there are some names out there as well. So if you missed it, the Avalanche did acquire Mackenzie Blackwood, Giovanni Smith, and a 2027 fifth-round pick from the Sharks for Alexander Georgiev, Nikolai Kovalenko, a 2026 second-round pick, and a 2025 fifth-round pick the other day. Obviously, when you look at Mackenzie Blackwood, his numbers look a lot uglier than they probably are due to the quality of the team in front of him in San Jose the last couple of years. But last year, he was still 23rd out of 54 goalies, qualified goalies of at least 25 starts in goals saved above expected. And this year, he's 19th out of 50. He also ranks in the top 25 in quality start percentage with a 58.6 quality start percentage over the last two seasons, which is pretty impressive playing for the San Jose Sharks. So this is obviously an above average goalie, an above average NHL goalie that now is a great team in front of him. So hopefully you were quick enough, rush to the waiver wire to be able to scoop him up in the competitive leagues. I believe when the trade went down, he was like hovering around 15% rostered. That is shot up to 52%. So obviously it's skyrocketed in recent days, but still available in 48% of leagues and definitely a guy that should be added. Just quick couple numbers here. So in terms of actual goal scoring so far this season, the Avs are averaging 3.3 goals per game. The Sharks at 2.7. So 0.6 more goals per game in terms of goal support. Then when you look at the 5v5 expected goals numbers, the Avs have an expected goals against of just 2.37, while the Sharks have an expected goals against of 2.95. So obviously a much, much better defensive team in front of Blackwood now. Let's talk about Blackwood really quickly before we touch on Scott Wedgwood. This is obviously an Avalanche team that can score, right? We just saw last night, McKinnon, 5 points, Rantanen, 5 points and a hattie. They're first and fourth in the league in scoring. Cale Makar has been unbelievable. They're healthy now. That was part of their issue. They were so banged up for so long. Now they are healthy. They are a very, very good team. And both Wedgwood and Blackwood definitely carry a lot of value moving forward. I know you scooped them up right away in one of our leagues. You got to be feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, I honestly, we are in week 9 now of fantasy hockey, and I went into this week, I kid you not, thinking I have to address my goaltending in one of my leagues. Like I need to. It's been killing me. And within a day, I managed to pick up Wedgwood. And then before the trade went down, and before I put out some tweets on our accounts for people to see, I also got Blackwood. So I grabbed the Avalanche's goaltending tandem, which I believe personally this is a playoff team. So if you have the starters for a playoff team, you can pick and choose. And I think I really improved my goaltending there. Daily Faceoff's own Colby Cohen put it great on Morning Cup of Hockey. He said Colorado doesn't need a Shesterkin. They just need someone to kind of play goalie. And that's what Georgiev has been doing this year. So they went out and they got someone who does that. And Blackwood, also another shout out to D on our podcast. He's been mentioning for years that Blackwood needs to go somewhere better and that he is a fantastic goalie. And I like to think that D is not usually wrong and that I hope he isn't here. Blackwood had a 9-15 in 47 games and 19-20 with the Devils with a very good team in front of him. So I kind of like to think that maybe he can go back to that point. But even so, with just the underlying numbers that you pointed out this year, he's still posting a 9-11. That's as far as goaltending goes this year, that's basically elite. We've seen guys like Jeremy Swayman absolutely struggle. Even there's 4 or 5 guys, big names under 900 right now. So to get a goalie like this, I think at 51% owned, Blackwood's still quite under owned in your fantasy leagues. That's going to fly up. We saw Georgiev's value while he was even putting up like an 880. He still kept a 70-80% owned percentage there. So I think both these guys need a little bit of a higher raise. Scott Wedgwood, though, since he's come to Colorado, all he's done is stop pucks. It's been absolutely bonkers. In his 4 games played, he's 3-1-0 with a 944 save percentage. So what I'm thinking kind of happens here, obviously we're just guessing, is it might be a little bit of a 50-50 split or maybe a 60-40 with Blackwood taking a little bit more. But Colorado did say today there is no reason why Mackenzie Blackwood could not be their goaltender of the future. And with that statement, I am fired up enough to think that that he's going to get some good starts this year. So pretty crazy. We're talking about a top 5 scoring team, maybe no, not at the moment, but in general, and you can get their goalie right now in 50% of leagues. So
Yeah, it's crazy too because like we talked about Blackwood, right? We talked about him a couple weeks ago, and we said this is a guy that should be on your radar because if he gets traded, he's going to be a great goalie. We said that it's probably going to happen a little bit further down the line, closer to the trade deadline. But the Avs obviously saw some, had some urgency here and made the move quick. Paid a pretty penny for Blackwood. Obviously, though, offloading the Georgiev contract at a slightly retained number, was part of that. But giving up a guy like Kovalenko, good player. They had to address it. They went out there and they did. You kind of pointed this out though, like they don't need, as Colby Cohen said, they don't need elite goaltending, and we saw that with Georgiev, right? I mean, he posted an 897 save percentage last year, and was good enough to lead the NHL in wins. So, like, you just got to get not even league average goaltending, and these guys are going to rack up the wins. And I think it's fair to say, at least from a Blackwood perspective, that he's definitely an above average goalie. Scott Wedgwood has been fantastic, right? He's been super, super good in Colorado, as you mentioned, 159 goals against average, 944 save percentage, and one shutout. And honestly, not super easy matchups either. The Devils and the Penguins the last couple nights, both offenses have been humming right as of late. So, he's a player or a goalie that has been kind of just meh most of his career, but we saw really solid numbers during his time in Dallas, another really good team. And if there's structure in front of him, he's obviously a guy that can give you serviceable starts. I joked about how the Avs are going to be splitting wood in their crease because you've got Wedgwood and Blackwood. I do think that, it's probably going to lean a little bit more towards Blackwood, but Wedgwood's still going to be a guy that's going to spell him on most nights. I think probably closer to a 60-40 split. And I would be adding Wedgwood right now, too, just in case it is a 50-50 split. Who knows? And he's owned in just 37% of leagues right now. So if you miss the boat on Blackwood, I don't mind adding Wedgwood right now either. They feel pretty good. So focusing a little bit more now on Georgiev, who has an 874 save percentage on the season. To his credit, he has been a lot better lately. Like, he obviously went through that really, really rough stretch, sat out for over a week, and he's posted an 890 save percentage in his last 12 games, 7-3 record. So a little bit closer to what we saw last year. Now he goes to San Jose. I already mentioned how bad they are defensively in comparison to the Avs. This seems really sketchy. To me, Georgiev falls to the exact territory in which Blackwood was in before, where he's probably a goalie that should be rostered around 15%, 10% of leagues, and is going to be an okay streaming option in the cushiest of matchups, but on most nights, you're not going to be able to trust him.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Another thing that's going on here too is Askarov still exists. This is now a 3-headed monster for Georgiev that he has to battle with. He might not be called up at the moment, but he will be there in due time. And when that happens, do you really want a goalie who's splitting 3 starts on a team that's putting up underlying numbers like we're seeing from San Jose? I don't really think you do. So unfortunately, you burned your draft pick on Georgiev. He's going to continue to hurt you if you do keep him. So I think now's the time. I totally agree. I think the own percentages should flip flop there. He still should be owned in those 15% of super, super deep leagues, because who knows? But yeah, it's a guy who couldn't even put up a 900 save percentage in 3 of the last 4 seasons on one of the best defensive teams in hockey. They have 2 members of Team Canada on their defensive unit. So if you can't do it with those guys there, you're probably not going to do it with an old member from 2002 Canada team, Mark. And I just wanted to crap on Marc-Edouard Vlasic. I shouldn't have did that.
Yeah, hasn't even played hockey this year, but
he is skating. But yeah, so it's just the difference of, we've always said for goalies, it's who's in front of you, and that has never applied more than what's going on here in San Jose and Colorado. And then add in the fact that he's now going to be getting even less starts with that third goalie in the contention there. And I absolutely hate owning Georgiev right now. I will say that.
Yeah, you solidified your crease. And did you have Georgiev on that roster prior?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No, I actually didn't own any
Georgiev
stocks, thank God, even though I was quite high on him this year, which I shouldn't have just mentioned.
You were very high on him. I remember in the preseason you didn't like Vasilevsky because of what he did last year, but you were okay with Georgiev despite what he did last year. And ugly.
I hate goalies.
I to my credit, I was not very high on Georgiev, but it's still like he's still a guy that felt like he was still had a chance to be a top 10 goalie, because last year, 897 save percentage. He was still lead the league in wins. So there was a lot of win equity there. He just was unable to get anything going. Part of me wonders that if the Avs had been a little bit more healthy earlier in the season, if things could have been a little bit different. But man, they just weren't getting any stops. And credit to that front office for recognizing that this is a team that has championship aspirations, and Georgiev and Noonan were not getting the job done. We'll see what happens here with Blackwood and Wedgwood. They've also got Miles Wood, so they've got all the woods covered out there. If you missed the boat on Blackwood or Wedgwood, hopefully you don't have Miles Wood between the pipes. Here are some other goalies that are worth taking a look at on the waiver wire. We'll start with Charlie Lindgren. Obviously, on this podcast, we're a little bit bigger fans of Logan Thompson, but the Capitals still feel like a team that's very comfortable just rolling both of these guys in a near 50-50 split. And Lindgren's still been pretty solid. This is still a quality hockey club in Washington, despite the injury to Alex Ovechkin. Lindgren, 5-1 with a 285 goals against average and 890 save percentage in his last 6 games. Do you like Charlie Lindgren, Beebs?
Yeah, actually, before we put all our research together, me and Brock hadn't talked about our goalies. I had Charlie as my top goalie. But with that said, I would rather Wedgwood at only 6% more owned. I will put that disclaimer there if I were to choose between the two. But the slim pickings down in the 30% area, I would definitely go with Charlie Lindgren. As you mentioned, he's getting split starts on a really good team. And with that, you can kind of predict if he's going to be going. If you are looking at your matchup going forward, you can try to set your fantasy lineup accordingly with him, and also play against the matchups if he is getting a nicer start, yada, yada. So I don't mind Charlie at 31. The names are very slim picking here. So,
there's actually the names are slim pickings, but there's a decent chunk of okay goalies.
yeah.
No, I feel like normally the goalie field is even worse. I think that with more teams kind of going to more platoon style goaltending, it's made it a little bit easier in fantasy hockey to find at least reasonable waiver wire options. Like if you're just destroyed in the crease, you can kind of patch it together. And we've got the daily starting goalie rankings now up on the Daily Faceoff starting goalies page. That really helps you try to find the best streaming options each day. And we put them in a chart for you, very easy to read, and you can stream if you need to. And there's plenty of options out there on a nightly basis. And we've been doing pretty well since launching. The streaming targets have been humming with victories. So if you are struggling between the pipes and these guys aren't available in your league, make sure you check out the daily starting goalie ranking tool at dailyfaceoff.com. I agree with you though, Scott Wedgwood. To me, him and Lindgren probably going to play similar games moving forward, I would imagine. And I think that I trust the Avs a little bit more. I think I trust Wedgwood a little bit more than I do Lindgren. Next on the list is Karel Vejmelka, 24% owned in Utah, 3-3-2 with a 236 goals against average and a 915 save percentage in his last 8 games. The hockey club have come out and said that they don't anticipate seeing Connor Ingram anytime soon. He is basically out indefinitely with no target date for a return. So yeah, Vejmelka is going to be the guy. Jackson Stauber, to his credit, has also played pretty well, but it looks like Vejmelka is going to see the lion's share of the work for Utah, who, I talked about it on my DFS report. They had a great start to the season, then just basically fell asleep at the wheel and have really kind of bounced back here in the last couple of weeks and played some better hockey. So their goaltender in Vejmelka seems like an okay option. Would you prefer Vejmelka over Lindgren right now?
I would. And I think Vejmelka was it's been helping him, his fantasy own percentage, actually, because he was just I'm struggling with my words here, but basically just so much bad luck for Vejmelka earlier in the year. He was playing fantastic. I believe at one point he had a 930 save percentage, but only had 2 wins and 8 starts. And meanwhile, Connor Ingram was on the other end with like an 870 and had 6 wins and 8 starts. Just a total flip, but just goes to show what can happen when this team is together. And if they could get Vejmelka just playing decent hockey, a 910 maybe. He's given us a 915 this year, which is absolutely insane, fantastic. If you were to put a 915 on Jeremy Swayman right now, a 915 on even Igor Shesterkin kind of thing, it would people would be going nuts. So I do think that Vejmelka is actually a sneaky pickup here. People haven't really been focusing on the Ingram news, and it's been kind of wishy-washy. So now that we have a bit more clarity here, obviously Jackson Struber is not going to take a lot of starts here, and they're probably going to lean on the goalie that's likely to be between the crease for most of the year when Ingram is back. So I'd say Vejmelka is probably the top name of the names we're going to name out here. And if he is available, he's definitely worth it. But with that, just be very wary of games that he's starting. I probably wouldn't start him against any of the big fella goal scoring teams out there. Just a dangerous game. But that leaves 25 other teams that I would start him against. So that's okay.
Next on the list is Joonas Korpisalo, who is in a very interesting spot right now. The Bruins have played better since the coaching change, at least offensively. They're scoring a little bit more. But Jeremy Swayman has been horrendous. You talked about it a couple times already. 885 save percentage on the season, a 47.6 quality start percentage. He's been just downright awful. Just to give you an idea, he was north of 60% quality start percentage in each of the last 3 seasons. So he's dropped off nearly 20% in that mark. 870 save percentage in his last 9 games, gave up 8 goals to the Jets last night. Meanwhile, Korpisalo's 5-0-1 with a 179 goals against average and a 931 save percentage and 2 shutouts in his last 6 starts. So he's drastically outplayed Swayman to this point. And if it continues this way, at the very least, this is going to be a split in the crease, and he could take over this gig. I mean, how many more times can you run Swayman out there? I think that maybe the numbers I've used here are cherry picked a little bit because like he did have a better run, his best run of the season, basically prior to that Jets game. He had a 918 save percentage in his 6 games prior to that. So he has figured it out a little bit, which is why Korpisalo hasn't got more run. But when you take a look at the entire picture here, for the most part, Swayman hasn't been great. So Korpisalo feels like he's working himself at least into a 50-50 split on a half-decent hockey team. They're at least good defensively. They might not provide a lot of goal support, but they're at least decent defensively.
They're actually fantastic defensively since Joe Sacco's taken over. And then, well, let's take last night's 8-1 loss to the Jets out of there. That was just ugly, and we're not going to talk about it for a second. We're going to pretend we're recording on Tuesday. But in their last 9 games since Sacco took over on November 19th, Boston has not allowed more than 3 goals in a game. So that's just fantastic for their goaltenders. Bodes well when you're doing a spot start like Joonas Korpisalo. So it does show that as long as Joe Sacco is their coach, they are going to be playing a defensive first hockey, and you might not get those goals to support his win column, but it should bode well for the other categories and should lead to him not absolutely decimating your goaltending statistics, because that's kind of the biggest worry here when you go to start some of these lower owned guys. I think Korpisalo has been an absolute dog as of late, and I'm very happy because I did suggest him early in the season, or in our goalie episode, thinking that Swayman would be out a little bit. So it's good to see him playing at least decently well and kind of helping pull this Bruins season back together a little bit. But as the Bruins play good defensive hockey, their goaltenders and at least Joonas Korpisalo is going to thrive. So I think this is a good pickup in the right situations.
You being wrong on Georgiev and right on Korpisalo is not something I had on my bingo card.
So
but yes,
weird.
credit to you. It's funny because a lot of it had to do with the contract, and he actually signed before the season, and it's still working out. Tristan Jarry is a guy that I had pretty high on my list in the preseason. Like, he just felt like a really safe value pick, and it has not been the case at all. Not the best sleeper candidate in the preseason, but at least Dustin Wolf's panned out for me a little bit. But Jarry, 4-3-1 with an 895 save percentage since returning from the AHL. That's 8 games. Not great. The Penguins are very, very high event, very offensive, very poor defensively. So Jarry is going to give you a mixed bag most nights, but in easier matchups, I still think he's fairly trustworthy. We've seen some pretty solid performances. He won 4 straight prior to the loss to the Avs last night. So he's been a little bit better. Probably one of my least favorite names on this list right now, just how bad the Penguins are defensively, but he's been okay. And then the last name is Joel Hofer. I mentioned on the DFO Fantasy Minute, if you don't check that out, if you don't watch it, check that out. I release them Monday through Friday. They're like a minute, 2 minutes long, quick hitting, fast paced fantasy news to keep you on your toes and make sure you're all over that waiver wire. And Hofer, man, since Jim Montgomery took over as the head coach in St. Louis, he started 3 of 7 games, so nearly 50-50 split with Jordan Binnington. We've also seen, Jim Montgomery obviously loves a good goaltending rotation. He did it basically by the book last year with Ullmark and Swayman just rotating starts. And if Hofer continues to play well, I do think he can play himself into a larger role in St. Louis with Montgomery behind the bench. And since Montgomery took over, 3-0 with a 922 save percentage for Hofer. So he's been really solid, just 7% owned right now. So he's the type of guy that could really be a nice pickup in basically any league. He's available, widely available right now. And the Blues offense has really, really taken off. since Montgomery came over, providing both those goalies with a lot more goal support.
Robert Thomas is back.
I was just going to say, before we stop talking about goalies, I do want to just give Robert Thomas a shout out. Since returning to the lineup on November 19th, 13 points, 4 goals, 9 assists in his last 10 games. The game in which he got hurt, prior to that, he also had 2 assists. So technically, he's got 15 points in his last 11 games. He's been really, really good. Left off Team Canada, so I'm sure he's got a little bit of fire in him right now. But yeah, the team as a whole, I mean, Buchnevich has looked better since coming back. Jake Neighbors is a great pickup right now, especially in banger leagues. I mentioned that one as well. One of only 14 forwards in the league that averages over 2 shots and 2 hits per game. So not a lot of those guys out there. If you're in a banger league, Neighbors is a great pickup right now. We've seen, Buchnevich, Neighbors, Thomas, Kyrou, those guys have all played a lot better under Jim Montgomery. Same with Joel Hofer. So a goalie that I really like. Any final thoughts, Beebs, on Jarry and Hofer before we take a quick break?
No, I'd personally rather Hofer. And as we're shouting out goaltender episodes, he was actually my breakout from last year's episode. So it's good to see him only taking about a year and a half to get there, just as I expected on the timeline. Totally kidding. But Hofer's a good goalie, and Jim Montgomery coaches good hockey teams. It's just how it goes. So definitely good trend to jump on there.